Hello there, and welcome to the tour of the amateur class mission ship, the 24th vehicle in my Wimpomania line of vehicles. My name is Wimp, and I am the chief designer, chief builder, chief architect, and chief dumbass behind the amateur class project. Now, I didn't mention that this is an update, but there is still something to show you, so I'm going to roll the credits for the first segment of the video, which is going to be the original vehicle. Right, and this is not it. So, unfortunately, I don't actually have anything of the actual original vehicle to actually show you actually. So I have no screenshots of it, and I don't have the blueprint saved either. But in a game called StarMade, which is very, very much Minecraft in space, I built a spaceship that looks very much like these two, called the Sterling class. And as you can probably tell, this is an SV and this is a CV based on that original ship. Now, I explain in the original ship segment of the Innovator class here more about the Sterling class in StarMade, and I'm not going to go into any details at all about it in this tour, so if you would like to know about the Sterling class a bit more, I have put the link to the tour of the Innovator class in the description. But for now, that's all you really need to know. The one thing I think I will tell you, and I didn't mention it in the tour of the Innovator class, was that on the original, the Sterling class in StarMade, this bottom deck was actually very, very small. It was about from that turret down to there, then roughly the size of that door, and then back up to that turret again. So there were no ground vehicles in StarMade, so it was just an on-foot. It was actually a very small cargo bay, really, but it was also the on-foot access to the ground. In fact, it was the only on-foot access for anything, actually. The other thing as well, and I did try to do it with this, so the door blocks in StarMade were what's probably known, certainly in some sci-fi franchises, as nano doors. So the blocks that made up the doors basically disappeared when you interacted with them. So when you clicked on it like a door, or you flicked a switch that was linked to the door, the whole thing would disappear. And on the Sterling class in StarMade, the entire back and the entire top of this landing bay here was the nano doors that completely disappeared, so it was open both rearwards and upwards, which is kind of cool. I tried to do it on this with the blast doors, but it didn't work, so I decided against it. Never mind, it was worth a try though, because I really like that look of the whole thing opening up. Okie dokie, that'll be the end of that segment. So the next segment is going to be its role and its task equipment. Okay, so it's marketed as a mission ship, but make no mistake, it is simply a general purpose ship. And if you have a look at my terms, definitions and conventions guide on the workshop that's linked at the bottom of every single blueprint of mine, you will see that general purpose is defined by me in my building rules as something that can, as a ship or vehicle that can do a little bit of everything but not much of anything. So the idea of this is to be used to go and perform missions, and it can, like I said, do a little bit of everything. So it's got some cargo carrying capacity, it's clearly got some vehicle carrying as well, and it can do a little bit of ground attack work, not much, but it can do a bit. It can do a little bit of anti-air, it can do a little bit of anti-ship, again not very much, but it can. And obviously it can move around, and it can be lived in for a little while. It doesn't have any grow plots on it, so it can't be lived in for, say, weeks and months, but it can be lived in for, you know, a week or so if you take the food on board with you, is the idea. Okay, that'll be the end of that segment, nice and quick-ish. So the next segment is going to be its propulsion, handling and lift capacity. So as usual, I'm going to leave it on the ground just so we don't have to put up with the noise of the thrusters, keeping it airborne. So for forward thrust, it has 2 large and 4 small jet thrusters. Can I get close enough, please? Thank you. Small jets. Braking and reverse, it has 2 large, one on the front of each nacelle. For lateral thrust, it also has 2 large thrusters. For descent, it has 12 small jet thrusters. 6 on each side, obviously. And then for ascent, it has 4 large thrusters. 2 on the bottom of each nacelle. The astute among you will notice there are no thrusters left off. This ship doesn't actually come with any max lift or a head full function. They are all on or all off. Because CPU is an issue, I wanted to keep this tier 3, which gives a little bit away from later on, but whatever, don't matter. Right, so handling. So it's mobility, starting with its maneuverability. It will accelerate forwards at 95 meters per second squared. It'll brake and reverse and go sideways at 80 meters per second squared, same number of the same type of thrusters. It'll descend at 44 and it'll ascend at 161. Its agility, it'll yaw at 45 degrees per second, pitch at 40 and roll at 89. And you might be able to tell from the position of the thrusters and the fact that I didn't point out any near the front, the pitch and the yaw is kind of ruined by having all the thrusters in the nacelles. But the fact that they are so large, the thrusters, in fact they are large, but you know what I mean, it does a bit better than it really ought to if they were other types of thrusters. So for its lift capacity, it can operate in up to 16.4 G. Obviously there are no gravity wells in the game, certainly not in the vanilla game, that go that high. As far as I know, the gravity of a planet in vanilla only go as high as 4G. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is 4G. But of course that is dry weight, and so you've got plenty of thrust for carrying other stuff. Speaking of the stuff it can carry, it can lift up to 21.4 kilotons in 4G. And the ship itself weighs 5.22. So it'll lift basically 16 kilotons, give or take, in addition to itself. Okie dokie, that's the end. Oh, should I give it a quick test fly? No, I'm going to save the time. Okay, that'll be the end of that segment. So the next segment is going to be its power, fuel and air. So as usual with my tours, I'm going to tell you about this stuff now and then show you where it all is later on when we come to the interior layout. So, power is provided by 4 large tier 1 generators. Its fuel, it has a pentaxid tank and 24 medium, also known as tier 2 fuel tanks, which are these ones up here, and I call them medium obviously because that's a small and that's a large. Air, it has 6 large O2 tanks, which are those ones. Obviously they are larger than the small ones that are called small. Blah blah blah. It also has 20 ventilators, 5 O2 stations, and it is fully compartmentalized. I'm not going to bother telling you how many compartments it has because I actually don't know without counting, and I could, but I'm not going to. Too much time, but fully compartmentalized. So a hull breach in one area isn't going to affect the whole ship, is the idea. Okay, that'll be the end of that segment. So the next segment is going to be its weapons, defences and construction. Okay, so weapons. It has 8 sentry turrets, 2 at each basically ground entry and exit point. So 2 on the side, 2 on the back that I just went to, and then these 2 on the front here. The sentry turrets are set to what I consider to be my anti-personnel configuration, so they will target ground troops including predators. Obviously drones are included in that as well. It also has 8 Gatling turrets, 4 on each nacelle, 2 on top and 2 on the bottom of each, 2 facing forward and 2 facing backward on each. And I've set them to what I consider to be my point defense configuration, so they will target not only drones but also the weaponry of SVs. Obviously drones include therefore ground troops, but whatever. On top of that, it has 3 cannon turrets, well, 1 on each side of the bow here and 1 under the chin, and I have configured those to be what I consider ground attack, so they will target the weaponry of HVs and bases. And then finally we have 4 rocket turrets, and I've set them to what I consider to be my general purpose targeting configuration. General purpose on a CV, I should point out, because general purpose on a HV is different, but whatever. Mostly because obviously these don't fire in atmosphere. So the general purpose rocket turrets will target the weaponry and the thrusters of bases, capital vessels and small vessels. Now, just because that's how they come when you get it out the factory, that doesn't mean how it has to stay. You can, of course, configure them as you wish. And, of course, just because that's what the ship comes with, it doesn't mean you can't add more or take it away or replace them. For example, if you want to put pulse lasers and plasmas, feel free. I should explain that in my building rules, I have rules governing the numbers and types of weapons that a civilian vessel can have. I've kept to that rule on this ship. If you would like to know more about that, please go and have a look at my terms, definitions and conventions guide on the workshop. Again, it's linked at the bottom of every single blueprint. Defences then. So it has a shield. It's only a tier 1 shield because, again, it's a civilian ship, and that's the rule that I follow for my own builds. It comes with a tier 1 shield. It also has a very, very, very small amount of armour. It has some hardened steel around the core, but that's really it. As for its construction, well, we're back to, for those who have been following my videos in order, we're back to the unpainted one over here, now that I'm no longer doing the segment ships. So here we have an unpainted one, and you can see what it's built from. So it has a structural frame, as is usual with my ships. The structural frame on most civilian vessels is hardened steel. The outer hull, as is again usual with most of my civilian vessels, is steel. There is a small amount of carbon composite. There isn't a lot. So I'm sure you guessed, and I should have pointed it out. The hardened steel is the blacker stuff. The steel is the greyer stuff. And then the carbon composite is the whiter stuff. So there we go. Oh, and let's quickly go in. So what the actual... Okay, weird. No, it's not going to do it again. So... other than the structural frame that runs through the ship, the deck plating, as you can see, is carbon composite. The only exceptions for that is where you're walking on the outer hull. Oh my god, is it when I go through a weapon? What is your problem? Aye. And all of the glass is the normal windows. It's not hardened or armoured or heavy or whatever they call it. I'm going to give you a quick look around just so you can get a good idea again of how it's built. Okay. Oh, and the illuminated orientation panels are carbon composite as well. Most of you are probably familiar enough with my builds to know that. Okay, there we go. I think we've had a good enough look. So that'll be the end of that segment. So the next segment is going to be its resource gathering, production and storage. So resource gathering, well, it has none. Production, it does have some. It has 4 small and 1 large constructor. It also has a food processor. As for storage, it has 2 48,000 SU ammo containers. It has 2 320k SU cargo containers, 2 96k cargo containers, and 2 24k cargo containers. It also has 3 large and 10 small cargo boxes. It has 2 16k water tanks. Of course, those water tanks are just cargo containers that I've called water tanks. On top of those, it has 10 armor lockers, 3 large and a medical fridge, and 4 miscellaneous storage things. So think about the wardrobes, the closets in the living quarters. Rightio, that'll be the end of that segment. So the next segment is going to be its interior layout and any remaining devices. So as usual then, I'm going to start with the any remaining devices that are on the outside of the ship, since outside the ship is where we already are. So landing gear, it has some. Headlights, it has some. So as you can probably tell, I've utilised its ability to shine through other spotlights. So the sloped lights are diagonal, so those point diagonally sideways and those point diagonally down. And then the cubed ones behind them are obviously pointing straight forwards. Speaking of lights, of course, my ship comes fully flight regulation lighting compliant, and we will start with the ones that are already going, and these are the running lights you can see slowly pulsing away. So there's 8 of them, 1 on each corner, so 1 on all 4 corners on top and 1 on all 4 corners on the bottom. On, please, thank you. And these let any observer know that the ship is powered. I'm not going to bother telling the story again about me up at the construction area up there, but even I find those useful. Then we move on to the orientation lights, and there are 2 flavours. The first are the illuminated orientation panels that you can see dotted around, and these are the ship's formation lights so that other ships can fly in formation with it. And of course they are red on the port side, white on the stern, and they are green on the starboard side like nav lights are. However, unlike nav lights, they are also yellow on the ventral side. Speaking of nav lights, we have nav lights too, and these are meant to show any observer the orientation or direction of travel of the ship. Now, you could argue that the illuminated orientation panels do that too, but whatever. And of course, as usual, I will show you these turned on later on. Of course, green on the starboard side. Ooh, that was a bit too quick. White on the stern and red on the port side. And then we move on to its anti-collision lights, and again it has 2 flavours of those. So we have the anti-collision beacons that, assuming you use the propulsion etc. switch, will come on automatically with the thrusters. They are supposed to let any observer know that the thrusters are powered and therefore the ship could move at any moment. They are red flashing on top and yellow flashing on the bottom. Did I see one? Did I put one down here? I thought I had. There's some there. No, I didn't put any on the very bottom, did I? It was just there. Yeah, okay. And then the second flavour of anti-collision lights are the flight strobes, and these are the bright white flashing lights you see on the wingtips of planes. And they are supposed to help with visual acquisition from a distance. As I always say, that doesn't translate very well into the game, because as usual the game will render the ship quite often before the lights, but whatever, it's realistic in it. So there's a pair there, there's one on each side on the stern, and then a matching pair on the other nacelle there. I haven't put any on the near the front of the ship, although as you can see I have done a nav light, but whatever. Okay, that will then move us on to the name displays and registry displays that you've been seeing all around. So here we have a name display, and as is going to be the case with all of these, it's going to be fairly obvious the projector that's projecting these. So you would obviously go into that one and name the ship whatever you would like. Boaty McBoatface, for example. For those who... Oh, and sorry, you can also do it in the control panel here, so that you can name your ship. Now, technically, the ISV Amateur is the first ship of the class, and that would be mine, technically. Now, if you can't be bothered to come up with a ship name for yourself, by all means feel free to use ISV Amateur. The ISV, in case you care, simply stands for interstellar vessel, so it's a vessel that travels interstellarly in between stellar objects, so stars. Then we have the registry displays, so this is the main registry here. So WM simply stands for Wimpomania 24, because this is the 24th ship in the Wimpomania line. And then you would replace the number symbols with the number of which yours is. If you can be bothered to do that, you would look on the workshop to see how many people have subscribed to the ship. You would then add 1, because I have 1 and I'm not subscribed to it on the workshop because I built it. It's mine, I don't need to be. And then that would be your number there. Again, technically 001 is mine, the USS Enterprise, yes, the 1701 is mine. So the ISV Amateur 001 would be mine. Again, no one's going to know or care if you just put 001. Also, if you can't be bothered, just leave it as the number symbols, or you can put a number there that means something to you, your house number, your date of birth, your credit card PIN, for example, could go there, assuming, of course, you don't tell anyone that's what it is. And then we move on to the class and registry displays. There's quite a few dotted around. So there's 2 at the front, 1 on top, 1 on bottom. As you can see, the main registry is included as part of the full registry. In case you care, this simply stands for Wimpo Manufacturing, the manufacturer that manufactures the ship. GPS, as I said earlier, is general purpose ship, although as you can see it is marketed as a mission ship. And there you can see its class name, Amateur. I do want to go round to the back as well, because there is another one there and another name display there. Again, it's going to be relatively obvious which projector is projecting those, because it's generally speaking going to be the one closest to it. So, I mean, this might be a bit complicated, because obviously I have some guidelines into the hangar, the landing bay here. So you might think it's one of those, but it's actually that one for that on top. Aye. Okay, anything else I need to explain? Not really. We can talk about the flat top pad on top. So this is for carrying around smaller CVs or very large SVs. There is 2 ways in. 1 door there and 1 door there, and we will see where those come out when we get inside, which we are going to do now. So there's a vehicle access into the garage bay. This is deck 1, I should point out. Deck 1 is the garage bay. So there's a vehicle door on the front and 1 on each side. There is either a small garage door or a large on-foot door, depending on how you want to use it, on the back. As you can probably tell, the ramps and the doors, as well as a couple of the lights, or in fact there's quite a few actually, to light up the area around, are all on motion sensors. So there's the one for this one. There is the one for this one. Obviously the other side is a mirror image. And there is the one for this one. And there is an on-foot only door just there. Now, as you can probably tell, the lights and the ramp are on a motion sensor. That one just there. The door itself isn't, because they are automatic on a CV. So here we have the garage bay for carrying around your HVs. I'm not going to bother pointing out every single thing in here, but I will point out some of the important stuff. The repair device, as I call it, because I consider this big room to be a bay. I don't know why they call a block a bay. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but whatever. Obviously, the control console is there. That lever will turn either both of them off, or whichever one can be turned on and off. That lever will do that. There is also a signal in the control panel that will do it too, but it kind of turns on everything that's sort of production and repair. The other thing to note in here is the single teleporter aboard the ship is just there. Of course, it's on a motion sensor, so it doesn't waste power. One thing I will talk about as well is the benches, and I will go back to them in a minute. I'm just having showing you a look around. The two 24K cargo boxes are there, by the way. One there and one there. That's both of them. So the one thing to point out, and there are lots of them around the ship, but I might as well talk about them now, is these benches. I call them in-transit seats. So the idea is that because you can't be standing on a ship that's moving in this game, I figured that there may be times, especially, specifically, actually, in multiplayer, because obviously you can't do this in single player because there'll be no one in the cockpit to fly the ship. But the idea is that if you need to get out of somewhere really quickly and you're waiting for someone to drive in a wrecked tank, that they can drive in, dock, and then sit in a seat. I mean, if they're in a tank, they might be able to just stay in the tank, but you know what I mean. So the idea is that there's lots dotted around the ship, so that if the ship needs to move quickly, there's always somewhere close by for someone to sit down. So before we go up the stairs, I will point out real quick, there's a single O2 station and a medic station down here for healing and O2, obviously. Okay, up the stairs. Both stairs, by the way, are the same. And in case you care, the Sterling class I talked about earlier, that I built in StarMade, it had, well, it was supposed to be stairs, but of course it was just slope blocks, a bit like the Innovator class, but it only had one set at the back. In fact, it was in the same place as these are now. So just in front of this landing bay is where they were. On the Innovator class, so the little SV version of the, well, little air quotes of this, I moved the stairs slopes to the front of the ship, actually, because it made a bit more sense to do that on an SV. On a CV, of course, it has stairs in both locations. Anyway, trivia. So, landing bay. Again, I'm not going to bother pointing out every single thing in here. I'm just going to give you a look around. Of course, as you probably saw earlier, the door is on a motion sensor. And actually, oh, there, that one just there. I was like, I can't remember where I put it. And as you can also see, the guideline LCD jobbies are also on the motion sensor too. Okay, let's stay on this deck. So the first place moving along the lateral passageway here is the holds with production. So we go into the port one first. You'll see 2 of the 4 small constructors and the large, along with an armour and small arms repair station. There's another in-transit seat. Obviously, there's some storage in here. These are the 96Ks. When we move forward, got some cargo boxes, a bit of fuel, and then the 320K is here. Oh, these red blocks. Originally, when I started building, I had RCSs there because of, as I pointed out earlier, the poor placement of the thrusters. Unfortunately, due to CPU, I took them out, but I've left red carbon composite blocks there for you to rip out and replace. Of course, that doesn't mean you have to put RCSs there, but that's what I originally put. The starboard hold is roughly the same, except instead of the cargo boxes, there's actually fridges for extra food storage. And there's some more carbon composite blocks where the other large constructor would be. Again, CPU was an issue, so you can rip those out and put in another large or an advanced. Okay, that's the end of that bit. So moving forward, we have the other stairwells that I mentioned earlier. So on the Innovator class, the SV version of this is where the slopes are. Right, moving forwards, we have some extra vehicular activity airlocks. So this is for spacewalking, equipment, exterior door. Also, we have an extending walkway, so you can be out here and looking around and stuff. Hi. And then we have the cockpit. So we have a situation table here for the 4 crew members to have a little briefing and decide what they're doing for the day and that kind of stuff. There are some screens for some notes that you can write on. The ammo containers are on the cockpit. There is one on each side. And then obviously we have the seats, the pilot seat, the commander seat and 2 passenger seats. Now this is deck 2, so we're going to go up to deck 3 now. So as you can see, labelled deck 3, just so you're not confused. So here is the elevator up to the flat top landing pad. Alright. Oh, the front one. Did I say the front one? No, this is the front one. So we have a trauma room. That door is manual, by the way. You have to click it. So obviously medical equipment in there. And then we have a recovery room. This is for the casualty to recover. So ablutions for the casualty, a patient bed. Those should be open. I will point out that the lower door transmits a signal that the top door runs off of. So if you operate the bottom one, the top one will go with it. And by the way, the reason that you might say, well, adjacent doors will always go together anyway. Well, that's an adjacent door too, isn't it? So I had to do that. Oh, maybe I didn't, because actually that is set to manual as well. So actually it might not have. But anyway, so shower, head, medical equipment, so another medic station. There is the meds fridge. Moving forwards, we have habitation, where you inhabit. So 2 double bunks. There are 2 shower and head rooms. Door is manual. The light switch for in here is there. And obviously the one on the other side is just a mirror image. We have a small kitchenette here with a food processor and fridge and a sink. We have a place to sit and chill and a place to eat with a nice view. I should point these out as well, why not? Because that I consider to be my intercom panel for talking to other areas of the ship. And I consider this to be my long-range communications panel for, you know, phoning home, for example. Okay, moving backwards, we have engineering. There's a manual door again. Again, I'm not going to bother pointing out everything that's in here. The core is up there. There's the gravity generator. There's your little field hull repair station. In case you're going online on a server, there's an offline protection device. 2 of the 4 generators are there. The other 2 are obviously on the other side. Shield. There's the pentaxid tank and the warp drive. There's most of the fuel, and as I pointed out earlier, there's also a small amount in the cargo holds as well, just to bump it up a little bit. More access to the warp drive. Here's the CPU extenders. In in here, through these orange shutters, is access into the thruster nacelles with a lever that just does a couple of lights. Oh. Missed. And then finally, through the back door of engineering, we come out to the top of the other stairs at the back. There is the landing bay. There is the second elevator up to the flat top pad. And... oh, yeah, I need to phase through into some things, don't I? Oh, do I? Yes, no. So, there is a detector there and a Wi-Fi behind it. There is also more Wi-Fis in the nacelles. There is one at the very back and then one at the very front of each nacelle. And I think that's everything. Yeah, it is. So, there we go. Righto, so that'll be the end of that segment then. So the next segment is going to be its shortcuts and signals. And this, of course, is why I'm feeling all discombobulated, because I would normally end on the cockpit, because I then use the LCD heads-up displays in here to transition into the shortcuts and signals, but whatever. Okay. Few things to talk about, and I'll talk about them when I get to them. So we shall... oh, hang on. Please don't auto-group. So the device group shortcuts relies on the custom device groups to function. If you are willing to deal with whatever mess it makes here and rearrange device group shortcuts and signal shortcuts, then by all means use the auto group, but it's not intended. You know, I will leave that up to you. So the device group shortcuts then starts as usual with propulsion, etc. Now that will of course turn on all of the thrusters on this particular build, as well as the anti-collision beacons. I didn't actually point those out earlier. I told you where they were, but they weren't on. So we have flashing red on top and flashing yellow on bottom. And there are some dotted around in various places. Oh, I thought I had more on top. Oh, I did, didn't I? I didn't think about that. So I originally didn't have a flat top pad up here. It was just hull. And then I had more red anti-collision beacons up top, but never mind, whatever. Obviously, on this ship, it's not so bad if you just use that. In fact, if you don't like the anti-collision beacons, you can, of course, use this thruster switch, yes. So the only thing that this switch does different than this switch on this build is, like I said, the anti-collision beacons. Then we have a whole bunch that's empty, and in case you care, the reason they're empty is because I like to keep these shortcuts in the same order on all of the builds. Some of you familiar with my builds will know that usually max lift is here, and a head full is here, and then there'll be drills here and emergency power there. So that's why they are empty. It's to keep everything in the same places, so that if you get used to pressing Control Shift and 8 as pointed out in the heads-up display, then to turn the vents on and off you can still do so. I haven't moved them. Sometimes they are moved around a little bit if I need to make room, or if I'm dumb and I don't think about it, I might move it around. So for example, I wanted to move the surface sentry turrets over to here because I wanted there to be... It feels weird that there's only 4 device group shortcuts and 7 signal shortcuts. And it made sense to do the weapons thing. So red alert is weapons as well, and that's one of the things I need to talk about in a minute. But it sort of makes sense to have weapons here and weapons here. But of course sentry turrets are normally there, so I would move it, except I shouldn't, and so I didn't, is the idea. Production and repair will of course turn on and off all of the constructors and the food processor and any of the repair things that can be turned on and off. I can't remember now which ones can, whether these repair stations can. They can't, so it won't do those, but the repair device down here I think can. And so forth. So that's what those will do. Why am I going up to the cockpit just to do this? Makes no sense. Artificial gravity will of course turn on and off the gravity generator, so that if you are in a gravity well, either a natural one of a planet or an artificial one of a space station, you can save some power. It comes turned off by default. I showed you the gravity generator, but I didn't necessarily say it's the only one on board. You may have guessed just from the size, actually, but there is only one on board. And then air vents, in case this is the first tour of mine you've seen, I will cover this. But in case you have already sat through this explanation before, I will try to do it as quickly as possible just to save you a bit of time. If we turn oxygen off and look at power left, you'll see that the power left doesn't change, because although the ventilators are no longer blowing air into the inside of the ship, the ventilator blocks themselves are still powered. So if you watch power left and we turn air vents off with that switch, you'll see you can save more power if you are in a breathable atmosphere. Okay. Thank you. Moving on then to the signals column, we have of course power save at the top where it usually is. So turning power save on will turn off almost all of the light control motion sensors and levers. It will do some of the external ones. It won't do these ramp and door controls for HVs. And unless I've made a mistake, it shouldn't do the hangar, the landing bay door either. I didn't make a mistake. Good. Obviously, that's so that when you're coming back in a smaller vehicle and you've left the big one on power save, I wanted you to still be able to get in. It'll also turn off all of the Wi-Fis. Oh, and all of the LCDs. So the heads-up displays on the cockpit. These are on the motion sensors in here anyway, but it will turn off. Well, so it'll turn off, like I said, all of the light control sensors. Now these room labels are all on the light control motion sensors, so obviously those are included. Oh, the name and registry displays on the outside of the ship as well are included. Right, let's move on then to red alert. Wrong button. So, obviously, red alert is used in Star Trek. I haven't necessarily used red alert because I'm a Star Trek fan, but I have used red alert because it's in Star Trek. And here's why. So this game is set roughly 350 years in the future. And I figure that by the time humanity is building spaceships like this, where any Tom, Dick and Harry can be buying a spaceship and fly around in space in them, I figured that the ship manufacturers would use red alert to on their civilian ships for their battle stations on a civilian ship, because any layperson knows what that means. Even people who don't watch Star Trek, who don't like Star Trek, knows what red alert means. So I figured, like I said, that that's why ship manufacturers in the future will probably use it, because anyone on board would know what that means. I will point out as well that red alert, as it would be in Star Trek, turns on all the weapons, it turns on the shield, and you may have seen them dotted around actually, but I haven't had them on. Let's turn them on. Loud noise. So it will obviously turn on any of the red alert lights that are in an area that is occupied. So at the moment we're occupying habitation, the red lights in here are on, but the red alert lights elsewhere are not. because we're not in those sections. So if we then go into engineering, the red alert lights in here will come on, but now the ones in habitation do not, is the idea. Okay, so that's that, and why I call it red alert. So the red alert will turn on the surface sentry turrets, but I wanted to give you a switch that just did those, and I didn't click it. I should have done. So that if all you need to do is clear out a few raptors or a couple of spiders or whatever, I didn't want you to have to waste the energy, the power and the fuel, I should say, for turning on the shields and all of the full-size turrets, just for that. So that's why you get a separate signal for that. The next two down are the flight regulation lights. So we have the nav lights that I pointed out earlier are red on the port side and they are white on the stern and they are green on the starboard side. And there you can see the flight strobes going as well. Bright white with the flashy flashy. Yep. Okay, that's those. Headlights. Alright. So, like usual with my builds, and there are some exceptions, because I quite often put the spotlights around doors like this as well to light up the ground. But when I don't do that, this applies. So obviously from the cockpit seats you can turn on and off all of the spotlight blocks with your keyboard shortcut, which I'm pretty sure for default is L for Lima. I'm pretty sure it is. It certainly is for me. And as I usually say, I give you a switch as well, because if you accidentally leave them on, you get out the cockpit seat, you walk all the way out of the ship, you come down onto the ground, you're doing something out here, and then you realise you've left them on. I didn't want you to have to go all the way back into the ship and back to the cockpit seat to turn them off again. So a flick of this switch will turn them on and off. And then finally we have closed doors, etc. So there are quite a few things dotted around, and I didn't point these out earlier, I should have done. You may have noticed them actually as we were inside. So we have some drone hatches from engineering. We also have the hatches into the nacelles. Is there anything else? Oh, the what did I call them? The extending walkways are included in this as well. So if you notice as you're flying around, oh, and those should be correct. They are. Keep doubting myself because, you know, chief dumbass. So if you're in the cockpit seat and you notice that you've accidentally left some open, or technically closed in that case, I didn't want you again to have to get out your cockpit seat and walk around to close them all. So you flick that switch, and as you can see, it will close them, any that are left open, including this one. And of course it will only close them, it won't open them again. Okay, so that'll be the end of that segment. So the next segment is going to be CPU and upgrading. So for those skipping around within the video, the core is in the ceiling at the front of engineering on deck 3. The CPU extenders are at the back of engineering. As you can see, these are tier 3 CPU extenders, so the ship is tier 3. The usage is just under the 1.5 million you are allowed. As for upgrading, there is actually some upgrading possibilities. I'm sure you can guess, but the blocks above the CPU... I didn't paint there. Damn it. Okay, there we go. All fixed and resaved and everything. So, as I was saying, you can rip out these carbon composite blocks and the tier 3 extenders and replace them with tier 4s if you need to. As I pointed out earlier as well, in the front of each of the cargo holds is these red carbon composite blocks that you can rip out. They are earmarked for RCSs, but of course you can put anything you like in there. And as I showed you earlier, you can go into the nacelles through these orange shutters on the sides of engineering, where there is plenty of empty space for extra thrusters or additional fuel. Oh, so there's some more fuel, by the way, I didn't point out earlier, but there you go, there's some. Or, of course, more cargo you could put in here, or whatever, I don't mind. What else could you do? You can, of course, replace the turrets with something more substantial if you want. Oh, and if you can find anywhere, so for example, maybe you don't want as many lights, headlights, you could of course rip some of them up and maybe put some drills or some fixed weapons. I mean, you can slap anything wherever you like and put some blocks on just to make it look like you've bolted them on if you want extra weaponry and stuff. That's always an option. Aye, so there we go. I think that's everything I need to cover with upgrading and stuff. So the next and last segment is going to be any other info. Right, first of all, I haven't included any choice of primary colours, so I don't need to cover that, even though I just did. I do want to point out, as usual, my damage texture. So I paint all of the hidden surfaces of all of the blocks in that, which, in case you care, is that texture in that colour. You might have been able to tell anyway. Now that to me looks like smouldering metal, and it certainly looks more like damage than that does. Because although you might be able to tell that a block is missing... I didn't notice that when I painted it. Does it look better on the other side? No, it doesn't. Oh. Whatever. So it certainly looks more like damage than this, because these textures are used elsewhere on the build. So that's why I do that. That's the damage texture covered. The naming convention of my ships. So, the naming convention of the Wimpomania line, I should say, is specifically what we're going to talk about now. So, I consider myself to be a noob, N-O-O-B, at building. So, once the starter class and the beginner class came into existence, and in case you haven't seen the tour of those two ships, I will explain real quick. Again, this is StarMade actually. I was going to run a server where everyone was provided a starter class shuttle, and of course it was called starter class sort of tongue-in-cheek because it was your starter ship. And then the idea of the beginner class is it was supposed to be the next ship available to you to buy, air quotes, in that game. So when I then came to flesh out the rest of the Wimpomania, or rather when I came up with ideas that fit within the same design theme, theme, synonym. I then decided that because of me being a noob and those two are starter and beginner, and actually this is the first time I've actually mentioned the starter and beginner during this bit, I then decided that all the ships in the Wimpomania line should be words that either mean newbie, N-E-W-B-I-E, as in someone who is new at something, or words that mean someone who is the first at something, which is why you end up with amateur and innovator and freshman and frontiersman and stuff, and rookie and cadet and, you know, all of that stuff. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the blinkies. I've covered a little bit of it already. In case you don't like all my flashes at you, this is how you deal with them. So, as I pointed out earlier, you can just use this thruster switch. I have given you a thruster switch up here because this one doesn't have a keyboard shortcut, is basically why I do this. Of course, if you're okay opening the control panel and just using this switch, then by all means. You then don't need to worry about the anti-collision beacons, but if you want to use that because you like the keyboard shortcut but you don't like the anti-collision beacons, you scroll all the way to the bottom of the device groups and you will find the prefix regulation lights. That's what that stands for, regulation lights. And you're looking for the anti-collision beacons. So if the group is active here, deactivate the group, and then you simply remove this shortcut, and then assuming you've deactivated them, they will never come on ever again. The other one to talk about is the running lights, and as I pointed out earlier, and we can just see this one up here that I'm pointing at with my cursor now going. If you don't like those, it's similar to the last one, except you don't have to worry about a shortcut. You just deactivate the whole group, and then because they're not controlled by anything other than the ship being on or off, they will no longer come on ever again either. So there you go. I usually point this out. It's not really necessary, but the nav lights don't flash. The flight strobes do, but they're only manual. Yeah, if you don't turn them on, they will never come on. So there you go. That's that. Righto, I think that's everything I need to talk about then. So thank you very much for taking an interest in the amateur class mission ship. I hope you get some use out of it, and hopefully I will see you in another video for a different build. So thank you again, and goodbye.